I'm Scott Starker. This is a course called How to Interpret the Bible. This is the fourth video, and it is entitled, Should We Interpret the Bible Literally or Not? Figures of Speech and Idioms. In the previous video, we studied the purpose of interpreting the Bible. This process involves the deductive and inductive studies of the Bible. Now I'm going to talk about should we interpret the Bible literally or not. Should we interpret the Bible literally? Let me ask this in a different way and see if your answers might be different. Are there times when the author would not want to be understood literally? There are times when the authors want to convey emphasis, emotion, seek to motivate, etc. For example, Luke 14:26, Jesus says, "If anyone comes to me and does not hate his own father and mother and wife and children and brothers and sisters, yes, even his own life, he cannot be my disciple." Certain literary forms that we find in the Bible, such as proverbs, poetry, hyperbole, parables, etc., are not meant to be taken literally. What are we to do with hyperbole? Are we lying when we use hyperbole? No. Why? Because the intent is not to lie. We expect that others will not be fooled. Obviously, they would not take the authors literally. He or she would intend to be interpreted according to the literacy rules associated with each form. What form or genre, such as hyperbole, which is a figure of speech and not meant to be taken literally, mean? To achieve the goal of being correctly understood by the listeners or readers, an author purposefully submits to the conventions of the language of his or her intended audience. The author abides by the rules of the language and uses words and grammar in the manner with which his or her audience is familiar. Each literary form or genre has its own rules. An author will use certain cues to clue his or her audience into what genre he or she is using, and then he or she expects the audience to attempt to understand intended meaning based on the rules for the particular genre. What would happen if we didn't know these rules? Then we will, more than likely, misunderstand the author's intended meaning. For example, Luke 16:19 through 31, the story of Lazarus in Abraham's bosom. You can see why it is crucial that one of the first things we do when we attempt to interpret a text is to identify the genre and its rules. Figures of speech. A figure of speech illustrates that not all statements are meant to be taken literally. There are some of the types of literary figures of speech. Hyperbole, a deliberate expression used for emphasis and dramatic effect. For example, I'm starving to death. Euphemism, an indirect way of saying something in order to avoid being offensive or to avoid breaking a taboo of some kind. For example, passed away, tossed his cookies, etc. Personification, when an abstract idea or something not living nor not human is treated as though it were part of it were human. For example, all the trees in the field clapped their hands. Metonymy, the substitution of a word to stand in place of another closely related idea. For example, the kettle is boiling. The pen is mightier than the sword. Synecdoche, the substitution of a word for another in which a part is used to refer to the whole or the whole is referred to a part. For example, all hands on deck, or when you're in town, give us a call. We're in the book. Metaphor, when an expression literally denoting one thing is equated to a dissimilar thing to imply likeness between them. For example, you're my little angel. Simile is like a metaphor, except it is an explicit comparison. For example, you're like a pig. When it comes to things like animals, we cannot assume that the ancient writers had connotations like we do. And then there are more types of figures of speech too. Idioms, a sequence of words that function as a single unit, such that the meaning of the individual words cannot be summed up to arrive at the meaning of a whole. For instance, when a listener or reader wrongly takes the literal meaning of the words and don't convert what the author originally meant as an idiom. For example, hard heart means indifferent to the needs of others. Spilled means unintentionally reveal something hidden. Under the weather means not feeling well, but in Australia it means drunk. Greetings and closings are frequent idioms, like good morning means hello for the first time of the day. Goodbye means God be with you. Ni hao means hello, but literally you are well in Mandarin. How are you means hello. It doesn't require an answer. There are a lot of body part idioms that are used to express emotion. Our hearts melted means our loss of courage. Weeping and gnashing of teeth means experiencing severe sorrow and loss, etc. In the Bible, we have a love-hate idiom in many places. For example, Romans 9:13, where Paul says, just as it is written in the Old Testament, Jacob I loved, but Esau I hated. The key is Genesis 29, verse 30 and 31. So Jacob loved Rachel more than Leah. When the Lord saw that Leah was hated, means Jacob did love Leah, but he loved Rachel even more. In a comedy routine, George Carlin is taking the literal word tube without thinking that it is an idiom. George Carlin says, down the tubes. The country is going down the tubes. What tubes? Are you seeing any tubes? Where are the tubes? And where do they go? And how come there are more than one tube? It would seem to me one country, one tube. What is it that every state all of a sudden have to have its own tube? One tube is all you need. But a tube that is big, somebody would have seen it by now. Somebody would have to say to Joey, Joey, look at that tube. You never hear that. You know why? No tubes. We don't even have one tube. We are essentially tubeless. The tube that he is talking about is any of various, usually cylindrical structures or devices, such as a hollow, elongated cylinder, especially one to convey fluids. Not the idiom down the tubes, which means into a state of collapse or deterioration. Can you think of any present-day idioms whose meaning is quite different from the literal meaning of the words? The next session will be talking about the genre of poetry and proverbs. Until the next session, session 5.